Sarah Johnson was having another busy day at Atlanta General Hospital. As a nurse for the past 5 years, she had grown used to the constant movement, the beeping of machines, and the endless stream of patients needing care. But this Tuesday morning in March would change her life forever, even though she didn't know it yet. The morning started like any other. Sarah tied her dark curly hair into a neat bun, adjusted her blue scrubs, and began her rounds. Her fellow nurses often said she had the kindest smile in the hospital, and patients always felt better after seeing her warm brown eyes and gentle demeanor. "Sarah, we have a new patient in room 205. Head nurse Patricia called out. "Car accident victim. They'll need special attention during his stay." Sarah nodded and picked up the patient's chart. Marcus Bennett, age 32, former professional basketball player. The accident had left him with severe injuries to his lower body, and he would be using a wheelchair, possibly permanently. When Sarah entered room 205, she found a handsome man sitting up in bed, staring out the window. Despite the cuts and bruises on his face, there was something striking about his features. He turned to look at her, and instead of the sadness she often saw in trauma patients' eyes, she saw a spark of life. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse during your stay with us," she said, checking his vital signs. "Please call me Marcus," he replied with a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "And thank you for taking care of me, Sarah." Over the next few days, Sarah noticed something different about Marcus. While many patients in similar situations fell into depression, he maintained a positive attitude. He made jokes during his painful physical therapy sessions and always asked how the other nurses and patients were doing. One afternoon, Sarah found him trying to reach a book that had fallen from his bedside table. Without thinking twice, she rushed to help him. "I can do it," he said firmly but kindly. "I need to learn how to handle these things on my own." Sarah stepped back and watched as Marcus maneuvered his wheelchair and used a grabbing tool to pick up the book. When he succeeded, his face lit up with triumph, and Sarah couldn't help but smile. "See? Small victories," he said, grinning at her. During her lunch breaks, Sarah often found herself stopping by room 205. They talked about everything: his basketball career, her dream of opening a small clinic someday, their families, and their favorite movies. Marcus told her about growing up in Chicago, and Sarah shared stories about her childhood in Atlanta. Other nurses noticed their growing friendship. Some whispered about it at the nursing station, wondering if it was appropriate. A few even made comments about their racial differences, but Sarah paid them no attention. She saw Marcus for who he was, a strong, intelligent man with an incredible spirit. One day, as Sarah was checking his medications, Marcus asked, "Would you like to have coffee with me? Once I'm discharged, I mean." Sarah hesitated. Hospital policy discouraged dating patients, and besides, she had never dated someone with a disability before. But looking into Marcus's hopeful eyes, she realized none of that mattered. "I'd like that," she answered softly. When Marcus was finally discharged after 3 weeks, Sarah felt a mixture of happiness and sadness. Happy that he was well enough to go home, but sad that she wouldn't see him every day. As his brother helped him into their car, Marcus handed Sarah a piece of paper with his phone number. "Don't forget about that coffee," he said with a wink. Sarah watched the car drive away, holding the paper close to her heart. She didn't know then that this was just the beginning of an amazing journey. She didn't know that this man would change her life, challenge her perceptions, and show her what true love really meant. All she knew was that for the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to having coffee with someone special. 3 days after Marcus left the hospital, Sarah sat nervously at Sweet Bean Cafe, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She had changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple yellow sundress. When she saw Marcus wheeling himself through the door, her heart skipped a beat. Marcus looked different outside the hospital. Wearing a crisp blue shirt and dark jeans, his confidence seemed even stronger. He smoothly navigated his wheelchair between the tables, smiling and nodding at people who stared a bit too long. "You look beautiful," Marcus said as he positioned himself across from her. "Much better than those hospital scrubs." Sarah laughed, feeling her nervousness melt away. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The coffee date turned into lunch, and lunch stretched into early evening. They talked for hours, forgetting about the world around them. Marcus told her about his basketball career and how the accident happened when a drunk driver hit his car. Sarah shared stories about her family and her dreams. But reality soon stepped in. When Sarah told her parents about Marcus, their reaction wasn't what she hoped for. A disabled man, her mother asked during Sunday dinner. Sarah, life is already hard enough being a black woman. Why make things more difficult for yourself? Mom, Marcus is amazing, Sarah defended. His disability doesn't define him. Her father was quieter, but equally concerned. What about children? Your future? Have you thought about how hard this will be? Meanwhile, Marcus faced his own family's doubts. His sister Lisa visited him one evening, bringing up her concerns. Are you sure she's not just feeling sorry for you? Lisa asked. Some nurses develop feelings for their patients out of pity. Marcus wheeled himself to the window, looking out at the city lights. Sarah sees me, Lisa. Not the wheelchair, not the accident, just me. Do you know how rare that is? Despite their family's concerns, Sarah and Marcus continued dating. They faced challenges everywhere. At restaurants, some waiters would speak only to Sarah, acting as if Marcus couldn't order for himself. At the movies, people stared and whispered. But they found ways to handle everything with grace and sometimes even humor. When one waiter kept ignoring Marcus, he started speaking in a fake British accent, so posh and ridiculous that both he and Sarah burst out laughing, making the waiter blush with embarrassment. Sarah learned to see the world differently through Marcus's eyes. She noticed every uneven sidewalk, every building without a ramp, every space too narrow for a wheelchair. But she also saw Marcus's strength as he handled each obstacle with determination. One evening, 2 months into their relationship, they faced an ugly incident. While leaving a restaurant, a drunk man made loud, racist comments about their relationship. Sarah felt her face burn with anger, but Marcus gently took her hand. Their ignorance is their problem, not ours, he said softly. We know what we have. That night, sitting in Marcus's adapted van in front of her apartment, Sarah realized something important. Every challenge they faced only made their bond stronger. When Marcus helped her deal with a difficult patient at work using his own experience, or when she learned to assist him without making him feel dependent, they grew closer. Their families slowly began to change too. Sarah's mother noticed how Marcus always called when he said he would and how he made Sarah laugh like no one else could. His sister Lisa saw how Sarah treated him with respect, not pity, and how she encouraged his independence. 6 months into their relationship, during a picnic in the park, Marcus looked at Sarah and said, You know, when I had that accident, I thought my life was over. But meeting you, you made me see it was just beginning. Sarah squeezed his hand. You changed my life too. You showed me what real strength looks like. Around them, children played, couples walked by, and some people still stared, but Sarah and Marcus didn't notice anymore. They had learned that love doesn't see limitations, it sees possibilities. Every barrier they broke down together made their relationship stronger, and they were just getting started. What they didn't know yet was that their biggest challenges and greatest joys still lay ahead. After 2 years of dating, Marcus knew Sarah was the one. He had been planning this special moment for 3 months, wanting everything to be perfect. The rehabilitation center where he had learned to adapt to his new life had become like a second home, and that's where he would ask Sarah to be his wife. Marcus had a secret he'd been keeping from Sarah. For the past 6 months, he had been working with his physical therapist, Dave, on a special project. Through intense training and with the help of modern support braces, he could now stand for short periods. It was painful and difficult, but Marcus was determined. Are you sure about trying to kneel? Dave asked during their final practice session. It's risky, man. I want to do this right, Marcus replied, sweat on his forehead. Sarah deserves a proper proposal. On the big day, Sarah thought she was coming to the rehabilitation center for a regular visit with Marcus's old therapist friends. She wore a pretty blue dress, her favorite color, not suspecting anything special was about to happen. When they arrived, the center looked different. Someone had decorated the main therapy room with white and silver balloons. Rose petals made a path through the room, and soft music played in the background. Marcus, what's going on? Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. Just trust me, he smiled, wheeling himself along the rose petal path. As they moved forward, They passed different stations where Marcus had done his therapy. At each spot, a friend or staff member stood holding a large photo of Sarah and Marcus from their 2 years together. Each person shared a special memory. "Remember when you two had your first physical therapy date here?" said Maria, an occupational therapist, holding a picture of them laughing during an exercise session. "And the time Marcus tried to teach Sarah wheelchair basketball," laughed Tom, another patient who had become their friend, holding up that funny photo. Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes as they moved through the room, reliving their journey together. Finally, they reached the parallel bars where Marcus had first learned to rebuild his strength. "Sarah," Marcus said, positioning his wheelchair at the start of the bars. "These bars represent where my new life began, but meeting you, that's when my life became complete." To Sarah's surprise, two assistants helped Marcus attach special braces to his legs. Her hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was about to happen. With tremendous effort and support from the bars, Marcus pulled himself up to stand. Sarah started crying, overwhelmed by his determination, but Marcus wasn't done. Very slowly, with the help of his therapist spotting him, he lowered himself onto one knee. "When I had my accident," Marcus said, his voice shaking with emotion and effort, "I thought I had lost everything. But then you walked into my hospital room, and you showed me that life had other plans." Sarah couldn't stop her tears as Marcus continued, "You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier. You saw past every obstacle we faced. You loved me for who I am, not what I couldn't do." Marcus's best friend James stepped forward, handing him a small velvet box. Inside was a beautiful ring with a sapphire stone, the same color as the scrub Sarah had worn when they first met. "Sarah Johnson," Marcus said, looking up at her with eyes full of love, "will you marry me?" The room fell silent. Everyone watched as Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. She knelt down to be at eye level with Marcus. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The room erupted in cheers as Sarah hugged Marcus carefully, mindful of his balance. The staff helped him back into his wheelchair, and Sarah sat on his lap, not caring about who was watching as they shared their first kiss as an engaged couple. "I can't believe you learned to stand just for this," Sarah said, touching his face gently. "For you," Marcus smiled, "I'd move mountains." As their friends and the rehabilitation staff celebrated around them, Sarah looked at her ring and then at Marcus. She knew their life together wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it would be beautiful, because love, real love, doesn't see limitations, it sees possibilities. What they didn't know was that Marcus had an even bigger surprise planned for their wedding day. Planning a wedding should have been the happiest time for Sarah and Marcus, but they quickly discovered it came with unique challenges. 3 months into their engagement, they sat in their 10th wedding venue, feeling frustrated. "I'm sorry," the venue manager said, looking uncomfortable. "Our historic building doesn't have an elevator to the reception hall upstairs. We're not really equipped for, your situation." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand, feeling his frustration. They had heard similar excuses from many venues already. Some places had ramps that were too steep, bathrooms too narrow, or dance floors that weren't wheelchair accessible. "Our situation?" Marcus said calmly but firmly. "You mean my wheelchair? It's okay to say it. And it's also okay to admit your venue isn't accessible to all people." On the drive home, Sarah noticed Marcus was quieter than usual. "We'll find the perfect place," she said softly. "It's not just about the venue," Marcus replied, staring out the window. "Every time we try to plan something, people look at us like we're asking for the impossible. The dance floor, the photo locations, even the cake tasting was in a place with steps." But Sarah had learned something important from Marcus over their years together. Every challenge was an opportunity. That evening, she made some calls to her friends and family. The next day, she surprised Marcus by taking him to a beautiful outdoor garden center. Her cousin James, who worked there as a landscape architect, greeted them with a big smile. "Welcome to your potential wedding venue," James announced proudly. "We can modify any paths to make them wheelchair-friendly, set up the ceremony in the rose garden, and the reception pavilion is already fully accessible." For the first time in weeks, Marcus's face lit up as they toured the space. The garden was beautiful, with wide, smooth paths between flowering bushes and trees. The pavilion had plenty of room for guests, dancing, and easy movement for his wheelchair. But venues weren't their only challenge. When they visited wedding photographers, some seemed unsure how to handle photos with Marcus in his wheelchair. "Maybe we can do some shots with you sitting on a regular chair," one photographer suggested awkwardly to Marcus. "It might look more traditional." "Traditional?" Sarah said, standing up. "What's traditional about hiding who we are? We want a photographer who can capture our love story exactly as it is." They finally found Lisa, a photographer who specialized in inclusive wedding photography. She showed them beautiful examples of wedding photos with couples of different abilities. "Your wheelchair is part of your story," Lisa told them. "We'll make it look as natural in the photos as it is in your life." The guest list brought its own complications. Some of Marcus's relatives were uncomfortable with him marrying outside his race. A few of Sarah's family members still questioned if she was sacrificing too much by marrying someone with a disability. One evening, while addressing wedding invitations at their apartment, Sarah noticed Marcus looking thoughtfully at the guest list. "What's on your mind?" she asked. "I was thinking about who really deserves to be there," he said. "Maybe we should only invite people who supported us from the beginning." Sarah moved to sit on his lap, something that always made him smile. "Or maybe we invite everyone and show them what real love looks like." They faced other challenges too. Finding a suitable hotel for out-of-town guests with accessible rooms, planning their first dance, even choosing a honeymoon destination that could accommodate Marcus's needs. But for every problem, they found a solution. Their friends from the rehabilitation center helped plan accessible activities for the reception. Sarah's mother, who had initially been skeptical, now called every vendor ahead of time to check accessibility. One night, after a long day of wedding planning, Sarah and Marcus sat in their favorite spot on their apartment balcony, looking at the stars. "You know what?" Sarah said. "All these challenges are making our wedding more special. We're not just planning a ceremony, we're showing people how to be more inclusive." Marcus pulled her closer. "And we're showing them that love doesn't need to follow traditional rules." What they didn't realize was that all these challenges were preparing them for an even more special moment, one that would make their wedding day unforgettable for everyone involved. The morning of September 15th arrived with perfect weather. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Sarah's bridal suite at the garden center, where she sat surrounded by her bridesmaids. Her hands trembled slightly as her sister Michelle helped her into her wedding dress. "You look like a princess," Michelle whispered, carefully adjusting the ivory gown. Sarah had chosen a dress that would look beautiful whether she was standing or sitting on Marcus's lap for photos. The dress had a flowing skirt that wouldn't get caught in wheelchair wheels during their first dance. In another room across the garden, Marcus was getting ready with his groomsmen. His best friend James helped him into his specially tailored black suit. They had designed it for comfort while sitting in his wheelchair, with shorter jacket lengths and special cuts to prevent fabric bunching. "Nervous?" James asked, helping Marcus with his bow tie. "Not about marrying Sarah," Marcus smiled. "But I am nervous about my surprise. What if I can't do it?" James put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You've been practicing for months. Trust yourself." Outside, the garden looked magical. The maintenance team had worked hard to ensure all paths were smooth and wide enough for Marcus's wheelchair. White chairs lined both sides of a carpet-covered pathway, and an arch of white and purple flowers marked the spot where they would say their vows. Guests began arriving, and the scene was exactly what Sarah and Marcus had hoped for. A beautiful mix of people from all backgrounds. Marcus's physical therapy friends sat next to Sarah's hospital colleagues. Their families, who had once been uncertain about their relationship, now mingled and chatted like old friends. Sarah's father paced outside her dressing room, emotional about giving away his only daughter. When he finally saw her in her wedding dress, tears filled his eyes. "I was wrong," he admitted, hugging her carefully to avoid wrinkling her dress. "I worried about your life being harder, but I've never seen you happier than you are with Marcus." Meanwhile, Marcus's mother helped him put on his boutonniere. She couldn't stop touching his face, remembering the dark days after his accident when she thought he might never smile again. "Sarah brought back your light," she said softly. "I'll never be able to thank her enough for that." The wedding coordinator, Emma, moved between both rooms, checking final details. She had experience with inclusive weddings and made sure everything was perfectly arranged. The microphone was set at the right height for Marcus during the vows. The dance floor was completely level. Even the cake table was at a height that would work for photos with Marcus in his wheelchair. As the music began to play and guests took their seats, Marcus waited at the front of the aisle. His wheelchair had been decorated with subtle white ribbons that matched the wedding theme. But what nobody knew was that hidden under his suit jacket were the special braces he'd been secretly practicing with. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle first, wearing purple dresses that complemented the garden flowers. Then everyone stood as the wedding march began to play. Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle with her father, and Marcus felt his heart stop. She looked radiant, her dark skin glowing against the ivory dress, her smile brighter than any star. Her natural curls were styled with tiny white flowers, and her veil floated behind her like a cloud. As Sarah walked toward him, Marcus remembered their journey, from that first meeting in the hospital, through all the challenges they faced, to this perfect moment. He thought about how many people had doubted them, but here they were, proving that love knows no boundaries. Sarah's father kissed her cheek when they reached the front, then shook Marcus's hand with genuine respect. As Sarah took her place beside Marcus, she whispered, "You look so handsome." The garden was quiet except for the soft sound of birds singing and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Everything was perfect, the weather, the setting, the gathering of their loved ones. But the biggest moment of all was yet to come. What the guests didn't know, what even Sarah didn't know, was that Marcus had been preparing a surprise that would make this ceremony unforgettable. As everyone settled into their seats and the minister stepped forward to begin, Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that in just a few minutes, he would give Sarah the surprise of her life. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Sarah and Marcus exchanged heartfelt vows that made everyone cry. Sarah promised to always be his partner in all of life's adventures, while Marcus vowed to love her more with each passing day. After they were pronounced husband and wife, Sarah leaned down to kiss Marcus, and their guests erupted in applause. Now it was time for photos, and this was the moment Marcus had been preparing for. The wedding guests gathered in the garden's main courtyard where Lisa, their photographer, had set up her equipment. "Before we start the group photos," Marcus announced, his voice slightly shaky with nervousness, "I have a special surprise for my bride." Sarah looked at him curiously. She noticed James and two of Marcus's physical therapy friends moving closer to his wheelchair. Something was different about Marcus's expression, a mix of excitement and determination she hadn't seen since his proposal. "Sarah," Marcus said, taking her hand, "for the past 8 months, I've been working on something in secret. Every morning when I said I was going to therapy appointments, I was actually practicing for this moment." The crowd watched in confusion as James and the therapists moved to either side of Marcus's wheelchair. Sarah's heart started beating faster as she noticed Marcus was wearing something under his suit jacket that she hadn't seen before. "What's going on?" she whispered. Marcus smiled. "Remember how you always said you wished we could have one standing photo together?" He began unbuttoning his jacket, revealing the specially designed braces underneath. "Well, I found a way." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was about to happen. The guests murmured in surprise as Marcus's friends helped him position his wheelchair. "These are new experimental braces," Marcus explained to everyone. "I've been learning to use them for months. They won't let me walk, but they can help me stand for a short time." With practiced movements, Marcus engaged the brace's locking mechanism. James and the therapist stood ready on either side of him. The garden fell completely silent. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began to push himself up from his wheelchair. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face, as her husband gradually rose to his full height. It was the first time she had ever seen him standing straight and tall outside of therapy. "Oh my God," she whispered, mascara running down her cheeks. "Oh my God, Marcus." The effort was visible on Marcus's face, but his smile was bigger than ever. He stood 6 feet tall, supported by the braces and his friend's steady hands. For the first time, Sarah had to look up to meet his eyes. "Surprise, my love," he said softly. Their photographer, Lisa, was rapidly capturing every moment. The sunlight was perfect, streaming through the trees as husband and wife stood face to face. Sarah stepped forward carefully, placing her hands on Marcus's chest. "I can't believe you did this," she said through her tears. "How long can you?" "About 5 minutes," Marcus replied. just long enough for a few perfect photos. The guests watched in amazed silence as Lisa photographed the couple. She captured them from every angle, the first moments standing together as husband and wife. In some photos, they looked into each other's eyes. In others, they held hands or shared gentle kisses. Marcus's mother was crying openly, supported by Sarah's parents. Even the wedding coordinator wiped away tears. Everyone understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, not just the physical achievement, but the depth of love that had made it possible. When Marcus started showing signs of fatigue, his friends helped him carefully return to his wheelchair. Sarah immediately sat on his lap, hugging him tightly. "That was the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," she whispered in his ear. "I wanted to show you and everyone else that nothing is impossible with enough love and determination," Marcus replied, holding her close. The guests broke into spontaneous applause. Many were crying, moved by this powerful demonstration of love and perseverance. As the regular wedding photos began, with family members gathering around the happy couple, Sarah couldn't stop looking at her husband with pure adoration. What everyone witnessed that day was more than just a surprise wedding photo moment. It was a testament to the power of love, determination, and the human spirit. But for Sarah and Marcus, it was just the beginning of a life together where they would continue to overcome any obstacle that came their way. After the standing photos were taken, the wedding celebration continued with a wave of emotions no one had expected. News of Marcus's surprise spread quickly through social media as guests couldn't help but share the magical moment they had witnessed. Sarah sat next to Marcus at their sweetheart table during the reception, still overwhelmed by what had happened. Every few minutes, she would touch his hand or kiss his cheek, looking at him with eyes full of love and admiration. "I still can't believe you kept this secret for 8 months," she said, wiping away another happy tear. "All those extra therapy sessions." "It wasn't easy hiding it from a nurse," Marcus laughed, squeezing her hand. "Especially one as observant as you. I had to be really careful not to show how sore I was after practice sessions." Their parents came to the table, all still emotional from the photo session. Sarah's father, who had once worried about his daughter's choice, now looked at Marcus with complete respect. "Son," he said, his voice cracking, "what you did today, that showed me everything I need to know about your love for my daughter." He leaned down to hug Marcus tightly. Marcus's mother couldn't stop crying. "When you had your accident," she told them both, "I was so worried you'd never find happiness. But Sarah, you didn't just love my son, you inspired him to do the impossible." The wedding photographer, Lisa, approached their table with her camera's preview screen. "I want to show you something," she said excitedly. She scrolled through the photos from earlier, and both Sarah and Marcus gasped. The images were stunning. There was one of them standing together, Sarah looking up at Marcus with pure joy, the sunlight creating a golden halo around them. Another showed the moment Marcus first stood up, with Sarah's hands covering her mouth in surprise. But the most powerful was a close-up of their faces as they stood together, tears of happiness in both their eyes. "These aren't just wedding photos," Lisa said softly. "These are a testimony to love." During the reception, guests kept coming to their table to talk about the surprise. Many shared how it had changed their perspective on what was possible with determination and love. One of Sarah's cousins, who used a cane due to a childhood injury, came up with tears in her eyes. "Seeing you stand up today," she told Marcus, "it made me realize I shouldn't let anything hold me back from my dreams." Even the wedding staff were affected. The venue coordinator asked permission to share their story with future couples who might face similar challenges. "You've shown us that we need to think differently about accessibility and what's possible," she said. As the evening progressed, it was time for their first dance. They had practiced a special wheelchair dance, with Sarah alternating between spinning with Marcus's chair and sitting on his lap as they moved to the music. Before the dance began, Marcus spoke to their guests. "Today's surprise was about more than just standing for photos," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet reception hall. "It was about showing the world that love doesn't see limitations. When Sarah came into my life, she never saw my wheelchair as an obstacle. She saw me for who I am." Sarah wiped away tears as he continued. "But more than that, she helped me see that being different doesn't mean being less. Our love story might not be traditional, but it's ours and it's perfect." As they danced to "At Last" by Etta James, their guests watched in awe as they moved gracefully around the dance floor. Marcus spun his wheelchair skillfully while Sarah danced around and with him, their movements perfectly synchronized after months of practice. The photographer continued capturing these moments. Sarah's joyful laughs as Marcus spun her, the tender moments when she sat on his lap, the loving looks they shared. These photos would tell the story of two people who refused to let anything stand in the way of their love. Later that evening, as they took a quiet moment alone in the garden, Sarah looked at her new husband with pride. "You amazed everyone today," she said softly. Marcus pulled her onto his lap. "I just wanted to show you and everyone else that our love can overcome anything." What they didn't know was that their story was about to touch many more lives than they could have imagined. 3 days after their wedding, Sarah and Marcus were relaxing in their honeymoon suite at an accessible beach resort when their phones started buzzing nonstop. Their wedding photographer, Lisa, had posted a few photos online with their permission, and the images had gone viral. "Look at this," Sarah gasped, showing Marcus her phone. "Our photos have been shared over 1 million times. People from all over the world are commenting." The pictures of Marcus standing with Sarah had touched hearts everywhere. News channels wanted to interview them, and disability advocacy groups reached out to share their story. Their simple love story had become something much bigger. "Listen to this comment," Marcus said, reading from his phone. "Your love story gave me hope. I'm in a wheelchair too, and I was afraid no one would ever love me. You showed me that true love has no barriers." Sarah leaned over and kissed his cheek. "You've always been an inspiration, even when you don't try to be." A week later, after returning from their honeymoon, they decided to share their full story. They appeared on a morning news show, where Marcus explained how he had secretly practiced standing for months just for those few wedding photos. "It wasn't about proving I could stand," Marcus told the interviewer. "It was about showing that love gives you the strength to do things you never thought possible." Sarah added, "When I fell in love with Marcus, I didn't see his wheelchair. I saw his smile, his kindness, and his incredible spirit. The way he stood up at our wedding was just one more example of his determination." Their story began inspiring changes. The rehabilitation center where Marcus had practiced received donations to help other patients access similar braces. Several wedding venues that had turned them away now started making improvements to become more accessible. 1 month after their wedding, they received a special invitation. A local organization working with disabled youth wanted them to speak at their annual event. At the event, Marcus shared his journey while Sarah stood proudly by his side. Young people in wheelchairs and their families listened intently as he spoke about not letting others define your limitations. "Being different doesn't mean being less," Marcus told them, holding Sarah's hand. "My wheelchair didn't stop me from finding love, having a career, or standing for my wedding photos. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." After the speech, a teenage girl in a wheelchair approached them with tears in her eyes. "I canceled my school prom because I thought nobody would want to dance with someone in a wheelchair," she told them. "But after seeing your wedding dance photos, I changed my mind." Sarah and Marcus's influence continued to grow. They started a social media account sharing their daily life, showing that a relationship with someone in a wheelchair could be as beautiful and fulfilling as any other. They posted videos of their everyday moments. Grocery shopping together, Sarah sitting on Marcus's lap while they cooked in their accessible kitchen, their weekly wheelchair basketball games where Sarah was learning to play, and their date nights where they found creative ways to dance together. 6 months after their wedding, they were surprised to receive a letter from a major medical company. The company wanted to work with Marcus to improve their mobility braces, using his wedding day experience as inspiration for developing better assistive devices. "See," Sarah said proudly, "you're changing the world, one step at a time." Marcus pulled her onto his lap, their favorite way to sit together. "We're changing it together," he corrected her. "Love like ours has a way of inspiring people." 1 year after their wedding, they returned to the garden venue for anniversary photos. This time, Marcus didn't need to surprise anyone by standing. Their love story had already shown the world that true love knows no boundaries. As they posed for new photos, Sarah looked at her husband with the same adoration as on their wedding day. "Do you ever regret choosing me?" she asked softly, "even with all the challenges we face?" Marcus smiled, the same bright smile that had first caught her attention in that hospital room. "Sarah, loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Everything else, standing up, dealing with prejudice, proving people wrong, that's all been worth it because I get to do it with you." Their story continued to inspire others, proving that love doesn't see limitations, it sees possibilities. Sarah and Marcus showed the world that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that break all the rules.